Kevin ducked as a Pep tried to bite into his face. Kevin fell to the ground. Luckily, Robert had brought his sword with him, and he swung it at a Pep's body. The serpent hissed as it ducked the blow and snapped at Robert's leg. Robert jumped back just in time and sent a white bolt at the serpent. A gold light surrounded a Pep, and he disappeared before the bolt could hit him. A Pep appeared next to and then. It tried to bite at her ankle, and jumped back just in time. Incarceration! And bellowed, holding her hand out at a Pep. A white light surrounded a Pep for a second, but it faded. You cannot use the magic of the gods, a Pep hissed, snapping at her again. Robert swung his sword, but a Pep faded out again and reappeared. Incarceration! And yelled more forcefully this time. The snake bent down for a second as a brighter light surrounded it, but the light faded again. Robert swung his sword again, and it cut through the snake's neck. However, the neck healed itself. He is of partly divine power. He cannot be hurt physically, and explained and yelled, incarceration, again. A white light surrounded a Pep again, and the serpent fell to the ground. It seemed to turn into plasma that faded away. What's incarceration anyway? Kevin asked. Imprisonment. He was originally incarcerated, but the Book of Necromancy probably freed him and told him. I'm betting it was our friend Tyros that unincarcerated him, Robert exclaimed. That would most likely be it, Max said. Ferdith was cleaning the potions room up. We really do need to get that security system installed, and said half-heartedly. Not a bad idea, Robert crossed his arms. A moment later, Algren came running down the stairs. There was another serpent snapping at him. I thought a Pep was incarcerated, Robert exclaimed, drawing his sword and running towards Algren. That's not a Pep, and said casually, waving her hands. The snake was surrounded by white light and hissed, fading away. I want to know why there's a snake trying to kill me, Algren said, emphasizing the word why. A Pep must have sent some of his serpent friends to help, Kevin said, surveying the room. They decided to inspect the castle, and in the end, they killed 6 cobras. All of them seemed to have an urge to bite Max's tail. Die! Max yelled one time, shaking an already deceased cobra in his teeth. Max, I think it's dead, and finally said after half a minute went by. So? Max asked, still shaking the deceased snake in his mouth, and pointed one of her daggers at the snake, and the body went flying towards her. It thumped to the floor next to her feet. I shall dispose of this cobra as well, Ferdith casually said, picking the snake up by its tail and throwing it away in the garbage. How are we going to explain why there are 50 snakes in the garbage can? Ferdith asked himself. I think it's time to strike at Tyros this time, Robert said when he flopped down on the couch next to Kevin. Where would he be, though? If we went to Melorosa, we would surely be killed by all the demons, and said calmly as if it was normal for demons to want them dead. Well, it sort of was normal. Oh my God, Kevin suddenly said, getting up. What? Everybody asked simultaneously. Haven't you noticed Values has been gone for a couple of days? You think she would have dropped by with the Tyros thing going on, Kevin said, bestowing a worried look upon them. That's true, and said, concerned about her friend. Can you try to speak with her telepathically? Robert asked. I've only spoken telepathically a couple of times before, and that was when I knew where they were. We have no clue where Valuria's is, and explained. Maybe she went after Tyros herself, Max added, making everybody even more alarmed. I don't really think so, Kevin said solemnly. However, he didn't know how wrong he was. The mage Valurias looked at the island with lush vegetation from the red helicopter. She was wearing earmuffs and kept on cautioning the pilot. Under normal circumstances, they would have been able to translocate or teleport here. However, due to a magical field the natives had erected, they had to depend on technology. They believed that one of the entrances to Marilosa was here and that a lot of demonic activity could be going through. The island was uncharted and was found by magical radar. We will have to land by the ridge, the pilot, completely dressed in orange, announced. The helicopter started to descend, but Valuria's covered her ears when she heard a loud blaring sound. The helicopter went sideways, and she fell against the window, cracking it. The pilot yelled and fell over also, but kept hold of the controls and tried to reposition the helicopter. "Are you okay?" the pilot asked urgently, pressing a bunch of numbers. Valuria's looked up at him. A trickle of blood was running down her head, but other than that, she was fine. "What happened?" Values demanded of the pilot. "Some paranormal wave hit us," the pilot announced to her. Valuria's put her hand against her head, and the blood disappeared. Valuria screamed, however, when her body was jerked. The pilot tried to press another button, but he seemed to be ripped out of his seat, screaming in agony when he crashed through the window. Valuria's jumped over to the pilot's seat, but the helicopter spun completely around, and she cried out when she hit the ceiling. She tried to grab onto something, but another invisible force jerked her, and she nearly fell through the window. She muttered something, and the glass restored, but the carpet started on fire. She muttered something, and the flames went out, but an invisible force jerked her entire body, and she was almost pulled through the window. She ducked down and grabbed onto a seat, but it ripped out, sending her flying and hitting the dashboard. Luckily, she didn't go out the window, but the chair nearly hit her. She dropped down onto the floor, but sparks coming from the ceiling almost hit her in the eye. "What's happening?" she asked herself. The helicopter had seemed to be breaking apart since that paranormal wave, the pilot claimed, had found them. She stood up, but another seat was jerked from its spot, and it nearly hit her in the head. She ducked just in time, but where her hand was, a hole appeared, and she nearly cut herself on it. She cursed but screamed when she saw a transparent figure surrounded by rainbow lights flying toward the helicopter. Valuria started to say something, but all the windows shattered again, and a shard of glass sliced across her hand, spilling blood. The figure flew closer to her, and she cried out in pain when another shard sliced across her arm. She was surrounded by black light, and consciousness started to slip away. Moments later, natives on the island could see the helicopter exploding. Ferdin. Valuria's woke up in a less-than-cozy bed. She opened her eyes halfway and saw a thatched roof, and it was unusually warm in here. She slightly stirred and tried to lift her body up, but she seemed to be paralyzed. She closed her eyes and felt consciousness slipping away again. Ferdin, the sorcerer Robert met in the enchanted forest, stood over Valuria's, rubbing her wounds with a special herb. He then went outside to a stream and put some water in a pail. It was dirty water, and there was a chance this woman might get infected, but he had to try to save her. He went back inside and cleansed her wounds. He then bandaged them with reddish damp leaves. Ferdin had found her washed ashore on the coast, a mile from his so-called house. It wasn't much of a locality, but it was mostly serene. Besides the demons that somehow made it to his house, most of his days were quiet. He had recently moved here because he knew of all the efficacious herbs here. He planned to set up permanent residence and might upgrade his home. Ferdin, as most people don't know, was an important part of the light prophecies. Ferdin was mentioned a couple of times in the beginning. Ferdin was 978 years old. In a couple of months, it would be his birthday. He had killed 5 of the past seraphs. They weren't, however, the same seraph as Christopher. The seraph line was believed to be eternal, but the very spirit of seraph was destroyed with Christopher. Valuria started to stir again. Ferdin walked over to her and pressed a rare cloth against her forehead. "Where am I?" Valuria asked. The last thing she remembered was black light falling out of the chopper. "Is that you, Valuria?" Ferdin asked curiously. "Ferdin," Valuria exclaimed, embracing him. "You shouldn't be getting up, dear," he said, setting her down again. "It's been hundreds of years," Valuria told him. "How could you still be alive?" "I never thought the prophecy would speak of you," Ferdin inquired. Valuria frowned, not the light prophecy, but the dark prophecy. "How so?" Ferdin asked, backing up slowly. Valurias laughed at him. Don't worry. I'm not evil. Well, at least for now, Valurias told him. What do you mean, at least for now? Ferdin asked her. Okay, I suppose I'll start to explain. You know the dog Max the prophecy talks about? I was his owner, and I gave him the potion. Anyway, Christopher, or Seraph killed me, she choked out. Ferdin gasped at this revelation. Anyway, I found myself in this abandoned church hundreds of years later. There were all these people robed in black. They were probably necromancers. They were following this so-called Seraph prophecy. Ferdin said, the resurrection of a victim, I presume? That's correct, Valurias said. Well, anyway, I went unconscious right away, and when I woke up again, I didn't have control of my body or my thoughts. Well, I could control my thoughts partly, but the thing that was inside of me, there was no denying it. It was pure evil and very persuasive of my soul. I tried to rip away from its grasp many times, but it always pulled me back. There were these 3 sorcerers that always obeyed me. I mean IT. They went about gathering items for the ritual of Seraph. Eventually, they put the chosen one named Robert in some kind of magical coma. They, however, were all killed in the process. Anne and her allies, including Merlin, started investigating. They eventually found out about me, I guess. That, or it was pure coincidence we met at the Endless Library. Anyway, for a moment, I had won over IT. I told her to run away from me, and it attacked her. She fought back, and it grabbed her. My body teleported her out of there after I finally saw Max for the first time in hundreds of years. I took her, including the disabled Robert, to Seraph's castle, and I almost completed the ritual when the others came. They did some spell on me, and I was finally released from the grasp of it. With their help, I was able to vanquish it, and my purpose with the dark prophecy had ended. Valurias finished. Quite a story. I suppose everybody is wondering where you are by now, Ferdin said. I suppose. I never should have left without telling the others, Valurias said, somewhat depressed. Why did you come here in the first place? Ferdin interrogated her. This place has the safest entrance to Marilosa, I believe, Valurias told him. Oh dear. I suppose this isn't such a lovely spot after all, Ferdin inquired. It's more of a paradise than others, Valurias told him. True, and there are also many special herbs. You should still be resting. Fall back to sleep. I'm going to go out and gather more herbs, Ferdin said cogently, leaving the room. Valurias sighed and shut her eyes, blocking out all the madness of the world and entering the peace of slumber. A few drunk demons. Lucerfidus took another drink from his mug, watching Tyro's harem performing their entertainment ritual for Tyros from the balcony. The harem just lived idyllic lives, dancing around for Tyros like that. Lucerfidus kept smiling to himself many times, thinking of some repugnant ideas of things to do with those pristine bodies. Before he could indulge farther into his fantasies, he was whacked on the back of the head. He turned around and smiled at his friend Charlie. We best leave unless, of course, you want Tyros catching you having your fantasies, Charlie said sardonically. Oh, shut up, Lucerfidus replied, whacking Charlie in the head this time. They left the caverns and sat near the beach. Charlie pulled out some bottles. I had to go to a store, and I took care of some humans to get these, so let's use them wisely, Charlie said emphatically. I planned on it, Lucerfidus said, popping off the top of one and bringing his head back, tilting the bottle downward, allowing the drink to go through his system. This is life, Charlie said, gulping down some whiskey. When he finished with the bottle, he slammed it down onto a jagged rock next to him. The glass shattered, and he grabbed another bottle. Lucerfidus, however, grabbed it first. That's my drink, Charlie said warily, poking Lucerfidus. Lucerfidus promptly punched him across the face. Charlie returned with an uppercut to Lucerfidus' chin. Lucerfidus jumped up and started running away from Charlie. Give me my drink. Charlie yelled at him, running and falling. Within a couple of minutes, Charlie had bruised himself rather badly. I'll get you for this. Charlie yelled at the sky and fell down in the sand. Meanwhile, Lucerfidus was up in a tree, finishing his drink. He dropped the bottle down, purposely making it hit a bird that just wouldn't shut up. He needed more. He tried to slip down the tree but fell and cried out in pain when he cut his hand on a glass fragment. Damn, he muttered to himself when he realized he couldn't walk straight. Maybe he didn't need more drinks. He found Charlie unconscious about 50 meters away from the area they were previously having their fun. He looked through Charlie's pack and pulled out another bottle. He started to take a sip when glass shattered against his head. He fell down, clutching his head, and he was kicked in the stomach. Lucerfidus rolled over in pain, and Charlie pointed a rusty dagger at him. "Give me the drink, friend," Charlie said warily, swaying. Lucerfidus jumped up, kicking Charlie in the chin. Charlie backed up, but Lucerfidus' foot made contact with the side of his face, and he fell over on the sand again. "Charlie, you will never learn," Lucerfidus said, turning around and heading back for his drink. However, he cried out in pain when he felt the dagger going through his back. It hadn't gone through anything major, and about all the damage the blow Charlie had done would put him in some pain for a while. Lucerfidus drew the jade dagger he had tried to use on and swung at Charlie. Charlie was slashed across the face, but Lucerfidus' arm was slashed as well. They continued this until they were both slashed all over, and finally, Lucerfidus slashed Charlie across the neck, and he fell down dead. He had just killed his best friend. But what did he care about? He had all the drinks he could ever want now.